What's up, my ninjas? I'm Strident, and I am back with another action figure review. This time it is the Marvel Select Sabretooth figure, the 90s version. I love this figure. I'm not even going to front. This may make my statements to come seem biased, but I'm still going to be, objective as I usually am. But I'm just going to tell you straight off the back, it captures everything about this character that a good figure needs. And I've been a fan of Sabretooth since the beginning. I did read his first appearance in Iron Fist, and I liked his attitude and stuff, but I didn't quite like the design very much back then. But then when they revamped it and it started looking like this, I was completely on board. He is one of my favorite villains of all time, and this figure does him so much justice, and I'm going to show you why. When you have a figure or a character of this stature with this kind of look, who's going to be opposite really good fighters and then ultimately end up being the nemesis of Wolverine, he's got to look, feel, and like just convey menace all the time. And this guy does it like in spades. It's fucking ridiculous. And the fact that his color palette is really similar to classic Wolverine, but it's a little bit more red. It sets him apart, but it also helps unify him. So you know he's related in some kind of way to Wolverine's universe and Wolverine's story. I always dug when, Marvel characters had a foil or a arch nemesis who was similar to them but bigger. Spider-Man had Venom. Wolverine obviously has Sabretooth. Ghost Rider has any number of demons, but Night Watch was one of them. It's a cool little gimmick that they do. Thor has Loki. It just works. And in this case, everything on him works. And they captured every little piece of that classic costume, that 90s costume, so well. I mean, they didn't just put it there like the original Marvel Legends Sabretooth, where he had all the details, but the stature and something about him didn't feel right. I mean, look at him. He still looks kind of derpy. It almost feels like a muscle man dressed up like Lex Luger playing fucking like the wrestler Lex Luger playing Sabretooth, and then like where the joints are placed and stuff. It's like almost too much. I mean, granted, he's really posable. It still doesn't quite feel as substantial as he should feel. He should feel like a brick that can jump all over the place. You know what I mean? And come on, we're not even going to talk so much about what Hasbro tried to do with this trash. This here is an example of the company not giving a shit about the character's the background of the character, the personality of the character, all of that. They don't give a shit. So anyway, as you can see, him standing next to Wolverine, he towers over Wolverine, even with his legs, spread far apart. You can get him to stand up fairly straighter than this, but he has wide-jointed hips, so it's a little bit difficult, and also he's permanently hunched, which I love. And I know some people might not like that, but for me it works because he is a mutant, he is animalistic, and I imagine that, some of these characters, when they're dressed down and they're not wearing their uniforms, they should still have the qualities that make them look so menacing in uniform. Once again, it's like Wolverine is his child. This is also what made it more awesome to read those old stories back when Sabretooth was a viable threat. Sabretooth used to kick Wolverine's ass all the time. And if Wolverine beat him all year, on Wolverine's birthday, Sabretooth would show up and beat the shit out of him. And that was what was awesome. You always had this one character that Wolverine just couldn't outright just beat up. You know what I mean? As far as stature in comparison to other figures, he's in between your Venom and your Marvel Select modern Thor. I think that's the perfect height. As you can see, he's standing up a little bit straighter, but he has that hunch. The figure just exudes personality. And that's one of the things that's important to me. You know me, I like scale, and I like my characters to be, to have personality. And I have to say, Marvel Select is like the best kept secret ever when it comes to Marvel fans, or Marvel figures. Just because they're out of scale in some cases doesn't mean all the figures are out of scale. They pay attention to details that the Marvel Legends just don't do. I mean, the number one, they sculpt the figures better. They don't go nuts on articulation to the point where you have to keep reusing bodies. Everyone's a unique sculpt. And a lot of times, even when they have limitations to their articulation via sculpt, you still end up with a figure that is a good representation, a really, honest representation of the character. I mean, this figure is a Joe Mad face, or even a Andy Kubert face on a Jim Lee body. You know what I mean? And it works well. It works well. One thing about 90s Sabretooth too is that he always, no matter who drew him, the stature, the details was always the same back then. Because back then, we liked the fact that this was a unique design for the character. We didn't simplify for the sake of being quote-unquote more realistic, The modern shit, just Sabretooth in modern years has become a bitch, and it's frustrating to see because he's such, if you know the history of this character, he's such an evil person. He's such a, like, if Wolverine is a badass on the positive spectrum, or, end of the spectrum, then Sabretooth is a badass on the negative end of the spectrum. I mean, he can whoop ass. This is what he does. He kills for a living. He's like, this is what he does. And the fact that, like, some of the newer figures don't quite, they just don't give you that. It doesn't feel like he is capable, This thing feels like if your toys came to life, he would eat most of your figures alive. The mane is so well sculpted too. I gotta jump into I'm sitting here bragging about the character and the way they captured so much, but the sculpting all across the board is just on point. The paint applications are on point all across the board. There's a couple areas where it's kind of soft, it's not as hard edged as it should be. Almost as if the suit was painted or spray painted. Some of the details were, I don't know, woven in there or something like that. But gloves and around his neck and his face, they're all hard edged, really, pronounced line work. There's a nice wash going over top of everything. It's like a brownish kind of wash. It might even have some purple in there. It just makes all the muscles really pop. The stripes on his legs seem to be done better. There are folds and wrinkles all over the costume to give you the feel that this is a real costume. It's something he's wearing. It's not his skin. But it just looks good. They even got the elbow spikes, and the elbow spikes look right. And they're not positioned in a way that will get in trouble when you're moving them around. Everything just works. It's beautiful. Now, I'm going to start with his head as far as articulation goes. His head is on a disc, a pin swivel or whatever you want to call that, a pin hinge, disc hinge. I don't know why, for some reason, I couldn't remember that. So he can look up, he can look down, but when he turns his head, it's kind of on a tilt, always, which is probably, the one limitation. But he looks ahead. This is the relaxed, and this is about as far up as his head can go. This is as far down as his head can go. For looking down at Wolverine and various other X-Men, which I'm not complaining. This is as far out as his arms can go at the side. And as you can see, there is a swivel at the elbow. There is also a swivel and a hinge at the wrist, so you can actually get those claw, poses going, or those like I'm just so powerful, poses going. But the claws themselves are just so well rendered. I mean, look at that shit. It's amazing. But no hindrances there. Like there is the fact that there is the hinge that his shoulder is on is brown instead of orangish or whatever that color is. He's got a twist at the waist, And it is a cut, so, you know, when you turn his waist, it does look like he's been cut in half, and it's kind of weird. He has wide-jointed hips, which I fucking hate. But, you know, for this figure, because he's so bulky, it doesn't bother me. He stands really well. He's got a bend at the knee and a swivel at the knee, and he goes about 90 degrees, which is not bad. He's got a swivel at the ankle and a hinge, so you can point. No toe articulation. So overall, he's still pretty articulated, even for a big guy. My big issue and my big nitpick with this figure is the fucking Y-jointed hips. I can forgive and forget about the freaking, his neck articulation. He's a big dude. I don't really see him, you don't really see him, his neck doing a whole lot. Most times when artists draw him, he doesn't have much of a neck. He's that built. And the mane is sitting up there anyway, so that part doesn't bother me, you know? But the wide-jointed hips are the bane of my existence when it comes to action figures. Number one, they can't sit down when they have wide-jointed hips. They just can't, unless they put a thigh swivel right after the wide-jointed hips, like they did with the first Avenger Captain America figure. And even then, it still looks funky when they sit. Certain kicks will look really weird with them because of the lack of range with the wide-jointed hips. Also, when you pick up a figure and you want to play with them, it should be easy for you to just maneuver the legs where you want them to go. When they have wide-jointed hips, it's extremely difficult. You have to twist them and then figure out which direction is the hinge going so that now you can continue to move them where you need to move them. And it's a hassle, you know, and it cuts down on how much you're going to want to play with those figures. You look at all the Japanese figures that I have, and they all have ball-jointed hips. It's just something you need. It's got to be ball-jointed. It's a barbell, a T crotch that goes across the crotch, a ball on each side, and the hips connect right into that. That's the way it should be standard. It's simple, it's cheap. I don't know why they keep changing this shit, but whatever. The figure is still awesome though. All in all, what you have is such a badass figure. I mean, look at that. From every angle, this guy is just badass. There's nothing to complain about. There's nothing else that I can ask for. I've spent one morning, for some random reason, playing with him and my Marvel Select Wolverine from The Wolverine. Now, granted, they're about the same size. This was when I was waiting for Happy Day Customs to finish my, classic brown suit Wolverine's claws. And it just made you remember how savage their fights used to be, you know, before they got all nuts and crazy with all the blood and guts that they do in modern Marvel comics. It just was savage, and people were getting thrown through walls, and there's all this flipping and jumping, and the fact that Wolverine was smaller added to the fact that you always felt like, you know, is he going to win? I mean, in my case, when I was playing around with the two of them, they're about the same height, you know, they're close. This Sabretooth is bigger than that Marvel Select, the Wolverine. But then when I got this guy back, I just had fun playing with the two of them because, I mean, just look at it. It's exactly the classics, like, brought to life. You feel like you can make it look like Wolverine is going to lose. You know, Wolverine really has to try to... There's a lot of bad guy to chop through when it comes to cutting Sabretooth. And... you know, if you want to go by the way Wolverine used to be, Wolverine used to use martial arts, you know, so it was fun. It's fun to put them in these situations where they're actually like fighting. They're physically fighting. There's choreography. There's cool shit, and you can do that with this figure. It brings things back to how simple it used to be, except this sculpt is like 1,000% better than what we used to get. You know what I'm saying? You look back at old Toy Biz figures, even old. They're old Marvel Legends, like I showed you earlier. And the sculpts they've gone so far in recent years. Toy Biz was scratching the surface, you know. You really saw them shine with their Lord of the Rings stuff. When we go back and we look at their superheroes, they were always so reserved. Whereas now, especially with Marvel Select, you see amazing sculpts, you know, amazing, unique sculpts with very specific, character-specific details, down to the articulation, you know. Characters like Venom gets, you know, the H joint so that he can, in his legs, so that he can do everything Spider-Man can do with his legs. Characters like Sabretooth get, like, similar joints to the bigger characters, but they still have the freedom of motion so that you can pose them in ways that will allow him to look badass and oppose Wolverine, you know? I can't say enough good things about this figure. It's just a wonderfully done figure. Awesome sculpting. Paint job is just amazing. It just freaking kicks all kinds of ass, you know? It kicks the shit out of every other Sabretooth figure that we've received thus far, you know? So, honestly, you owe it to yourself. If you like the X-Men, if you like Sabretooth, if you like Wolverine, you need this figure. If you like Iron Fist, I don't know how Iron Fist was beating Sabretooth, but, you know, whatever. Still, if you like this character, you need to get this figure. It's just perfect. And it's $20 or less. The bullshit Marvel Legends one I showed you last, the one that was from that exclusive Wolverine wave that was online, that one cost more than $20. You owe it to yourself to get this figure. $20. Sometimes it's under $20 if you find them online at a decent vendor. So anyway, buy this figure. I'm Strident. This is my story. I'm sticking to it. This has been my review of the Marvel Select Sabretooth from the 90s. And that's it for me. You guys have been great. Peace outside.